All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the next protocol deep dive. This time we have API3 with us. How do I pronounce your name? Is it
It's Ugur.
Ugur?
Yeah.
Sweet. Thanks so much for coming on. I actually met him for the first time out in Berlin at the Oracle conference. Played some foosball. It's great to actually have you here on the call, and I'm excited because I know you guys have been up to a lot, and you were one of the projects that I actually didn't really know what you guys were up to and some of the changes. Like I knew like where you guys were a year and a half ago, and now in my mind you're still there. So I'm excited
Yeah.
to find out more. But yeah, I guess before we kind of deep dive into the protocol, how did you start API3? Tell me your journey.
How I didn't found it. I joined basically
Okay.
at the early stages, I want to say. So I'll leave this up to you if I should go into how I
No,
started
you don't
API3
have
or
to
if I
how you started it then, yeah. I guess just what was kind of the early, were you there before it launched?
basically a couple of weeks after the token distribution. So that's why I would say almost launch, but not in the pre-launch phase, so to speak.
Yeah, well, I know well, maybe you can just answer some questions that might be relevant to people. Did API3 raise money? Do you know?
Yes, definitely they raised money. Or we raised money. So there was a pre-seed round led by Pantera and some others. I'm so sorry to all of the investors if I don't remember all of them, but that's not my expertise. But there was a pre-seed round for 3 million, and then there was the official token distribution for, I think it was around 20-ish something in late December of 2020.
So you guys did like an actual ICO sale, right?
It was like a token distribution on Mesa,
Okay.
where basically US participants were excluded and people were able to, on a curve, essentially. I don't quite remember the details. I didn't participate myself, but there was a sale. That's all I'm aware of.
Yeah, no, well, it's interesting because 2020 was like kind of late for a token sale, actually, right? You guys were creeping into airdrop territory.
Yeah, guess so. I
But
mean,
no,
I was also not that involved in crypto. Like I basically started, I want to say at the beginning of 2019, because I was bored during my master thesis and somebody threw me the Bitcoin white paper. And then that's how I got rolling into it. So 2017 is a bit like, I only hear stories about it.
nice. Well, super cool. Yeah, no, it's interesting to see where people have raised as far as oracles go, because it's obviously like all over the place for
Yeah.
this space. But then before we start, and we can go into kind of how you guys work now, that's going to be the goal, but have there been any big changes to how you guys have thought about it over the years, like from whenever you founded it to now? Like what's been like, what was like a big misconception maybe you guys had about the space or about how oracles work?
I think the biggest misconception so far was that everything needs to be on ETH mainnet. We are getting way more demand on other like alternative chains or rollups and so on, and it's actually outweighing quite heavily any demand that we would have on ETH mainnet. So a lot of effort has been going basically to be able to serve that, whereas that is not the clientele that is currently asking us for Oracle services. So I would say that changed quite drastically. And also the type of data we want to serve, like I'm not sure, maybe we'll go into it during the talks, but we currently still make it, but we made it quite a big of an effort to essentially translate API specifications, made these Swagger files completely, like entire docs, make them available on chain, whereas typically people just want a small subset of that. Like they want 3, 4, 5 endpoints. They don't even care about having access to all of that. So we're essentially focusing more on bringing the relevant things on chain, whereas giving everybody the opportunity to essentially call any API endpoint of a specific API provider.
Okay, no, that's cool. Yeah, so I guess just honing your product and a little bit. Yeah, I think everybody has said, you know, like us included, as far as like the going to multiple chains, that's been something that everyone's, you know, like everyone has, like, you have the token on mainnet Ethereum now, but it's like all the demands go in other places, which is cool.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
Yeah, well, let's just kind of get into doing, I guess, the deep dive. So I will be putting it in speaker mode, so then hopefully this will show up. Okay, so where should we start with? By the way, I don't even know what your logo is, but why is it?
It's just a triangle. It's a triangle.
Triangle. Do you know why is it called API3?
It's APIs for Web3. I have been told so. Makes sense, right? Kind of boring, but makes sense.
All right, so let's assume. So we'll start. I guess I'll kind of maybe draw what I know.
Yeah, sure.
You can like fill me in. So I guess you could start. You know, like we'll do the user over here on Ethereum, and then or because the token's on Ethereum. So then we'll have to start there. You guys work the way that you guys are different than traditional oracles is that you're actually not on chain, or most of your stuff is at least not on chain. It's these, I think you call them API providers, the direct people. So you would go directly to Coinbase or Binance or whoever, and you would get them to sign prices, correct?
Yeah, essentially. So what we do is we have an Oracle node called Airnode, and how that precisely works is it's a serverless function where we that has certain configurations that essentially map on the Oracle node the API endpoints to callable Oracle endpoints, so to speak. And then everybody can essentially make a request to a contract that is deployed on whatever chain we're serving, in this case Ethereum, and the respective Airnode of whoever the data provider is checks that specific contract for incoming requests. So if somebody made a request there, for instance, get Bitcoin price, the specific Airnode the request is made to is specified, the parameters are specified, and then essentially that Airnode of the provider basically knows, oh, it's me, calls the API, gets the response, and then the Airnode itself basically gives the contract the answer.
Okay, so here's what I got from that so far. So you would have, so there would be like a user. So this would be, you know, what's a user of some user of an Oracle, some derivatives protocol. And they would make a request into your smart contract, right? That's deployed on ETH mainnet. Do they have to pay a fee for that?
Essentially, there's going to be it's kind of like getting whitelisted for it. So there's on the protocol level, people essentially at some point going to stake API3 to get whitelisted there, and then they're going to be able to make calls to a specific Airnode.
So right now it's sort of free, but in the future, in order to make a request there, you would have to be whitelisted by staking API3?
Yeah, so maybe I should go into like, because there's different levels of how we monetize. Like there's 3 components to API3. We basically have the protocol layer that is currently what we're building up. So essentially we have request response that you're building up or pub sub. And in order to access directly an Airnode, you would at some point, it's currently for free, at some point stake API3, and then you get access to all of the endpoints of that specific Airnode. That is, so to speak, the base layer. Then on top of these Airnodes, we can also build different products. For instance,
so
one of these.
With that, like once you're staked, so right now it's request-based, but in the future it's going to be you stake, and then you would basically just pull the signed prices off and put them in yourself, right?
You know, exactly, sorry.
So the user contract. So like now, so the Airnode actually doesn't go into the request contract. The Airnode goes all the way over. The user would grab it and grab those signed prices and put them into their contract directly, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Okay, so then, sorry, I interrupted you. I think there was one more monetization piece.
Actually two, but yeah, like
Yeah,
basically what we then, like this is the base layer, like we say, and this is again like a request response. On the base layer, you could also have pub/sub where a user essentially subscribes to an API endpoint and says, please write this and this data on chain when a certain condition is met. It essentially also acts sort of like a keeper. For instance, please write, once the API endpoint tells you it's 30 degrees, please write the answer on chain. So you don't actually have to monitor it, or you don't have to constantly call the API, pay for gas, and check what is the temperature right now. You essentially tell the endpoint, yeah, wake up when it's time. And that is pub/sub. And that is if you would have to build like a certain application, like if you want granularity, you want to build the stuff on your own and so on. But what we also do currently, and what we're going to have been testing in the last couple of months and going to be launching soon, is essentially data feed products that we build on top of Airnode. So we have an API endpoint, an API provider that deployed Airnode, and then we use that Oracle node to essentially continuously bring data on chain, similarly to how Chainlink would do it or whatever. And
you'll probably have like some contract up here that's just like a price feed contract, right?
It's one contract for all price feeds essentially. It's called, yeah. It's essentially a server where a certain ID is mapped to a certain value.
Yep, cool.
And
you guys should come, and if you haven't launched it yet, you can get on with the EIP with Otto, the Alliance of Decentralized Oracles.
Yeah.
For purposes, just saying. Anyway, continue.
Yeah, so essentially that product, that data feed product is called a beacon, and a beacon is essentially certain parameters together with an Airnode that give you a certain ID. So essentially a beacon is always the combination of an Airnode with a template, and that template is get price, Bitcoin USD, and it can essentially never be changed. Those two together are a hash, and you always, if you call that, get that provider with those parameters. They are not changeable at all, which of course comes with a little bit of issues. What if the provider goes down, yada, yada. But essentially it gives you the granularity you would need where you want to specify exactly where you get your data from. And you can also build beacon sets. What we call those is when you want to mash together a lot of providers. So Airnode provider 1 with these parameters together with Airnode provider 2 with those parameters, that of course it should make sense. For instance, querying the Bitcoin price of all and then getting the median from that. But essentially you're able to combine your own sets however you want. And this is still something where a user, like, they know what they're doing. They want to build this themselves. They want precisely that provider and so on. So and the last product.
This would be like, you would have like Coinbase, Binance, Kraken, right? And you would
exactly, but not only Coinbase, Kraken, and whatever. It's like Bitcoin USD Coinbase, Bitcoin USD Kraken.
The whole API URL, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, so to speak. And it's a hash that's not changeable. So you always, when you call that, given that the Airnode is up and the provider is not, this didn't disappear, this will always yield you the same result.
Yep. Cool. And then so you would bring those on chain, and they would.
Yeah.
And
then we have like a final product if we're finished with that, and that is essentially a fully managed service. We call those the APIs. And how you can
you have to stake API tokens and then get access to it, or
those I mean, we're gonna publish that pretty soon. There's gonna be a trial phase where you get access to them for free, and then essentially you're gonna be paying for those in a similar way you would be paying for a subscription. We're gonna be taking payment in the native token of wherever that specific data feed is made available. So if you're getting this on BNB chain, you're paying us in BNB, and so on. And it's on a subscription model. You get whitelisted for the amount of time you pay for.
Okay, cool. I mean, how are you guys thinking too? Like, you know, we were originally publishing those updates in similar to like a price feed manner, but then gas prices on Ethereum exploded after we launched in 2019. You know, is there, would it be like on a sliding scale, I guess, the fee, like if gas prices on Polygon like 10x or 100x, would you guys be raising it in the future, or?
Yeah, I mean, definitely the subscription thing is something we can change. Of course, we can't change subscriptions that have already been paid for, but if we realize that gas doubled or quadrupled, we will have to adjust prices. Since we are not willing to subsidize these, we want to essentially show you what it actually costs to run a feed and not dump on you to make it affordable, or dump on our token holders to make it affordable for the users.
That's sort of the Oracle model of the day though, right? You use token revenue to provide free price feeds for people. This is
yeah, I'd argue it's not a sustainable one. If users should be made aware of what it actually costs, and there are also certain like conditions of how you can tweak the cost. In most cases, you don't need a 0.1% deviation price feed that triggers every 15 seconds. It's absolute overkill, but it sounds nice on a marketing level. Most protocols are probably fine having like, I'm not sure, a 1% or something deviation, and that suddenly decreases the cost by a factor of 10, and they're like, oh, we didn't know this was this cheap to actually do this. Yeah, but yeah.
All right, last one. You have the last product you're showing me.
Yeah, that is called a DAPI, and DAPI, you can imagine, it's essentially a mapping. Imagine it as something like a DNS resolution or an ENS name. A DAPI is managed by, currently it's going to be a multi-sig by the technical team of API3, but in the future we're going to be handing over control to the DAO. And a DAPI is, for instance, the name BTC USD. And then we have control over which beacon or which beacon set we can point this name towards. What this does is two things. The first one being that if a user subscribes to a DAPI, they will get a changing underlying data sources, but they don't essentially care. The only thing that they want is a BTC USD product, and we as API3 currently make then the decision which provider or which set of providers are the best choice for that. And this product is also fully managed and comes with coverage. You can essentially say, I want to be covered up to 1 million. So the API3 DAO, so to speak, is it's in our best interest to choose the most reliable sources, because of course we don't want to pay you out we don't want to be paying out in case something goes wrong. So we would manage our risk accordingly, where we would take, for instance, as many providers as we can and reduce potential malicious actors like that.
Cool. And then I mean, so this one, there it would go to, I know the answer, but I'll just ask you. So then what happens if there's a dispute, I guess, and somebody says, hey, do I get paid out?
So how it will work is that if somebody has a subscription, we're essentially creating a subscription file on chain, and that person is then able to go to our dashboard and essentially create a claim. They can state the damages they incurred. Of course, there need to be some. Just saying your feed like didn't act how it's supposed to, but I didn't suffer any damages, isn't gonna work. So there is gonna be some evidence they need to produce, and that will then arrive at API3. It's going to be a team managing those, and that team will essentially, as a first instance, make a decision: is this claim valid? Is it not valid? Do we pay out? Do we not pay out? And in case they say yes, the person is just able to essentially get paid out an API3 equivalent of USD, no, a USD equivalent in API3. That's the way. And if we say no for some reason, they are able to escalate to Claros. Claros has a direct connection, so to speak, a contract that can withdraw from the API3 staking pool. And a person, I mean, that's the question, how deep we want to go into Claros here, but essentially
Claros is the previous episode, so anybody watching this, go watch the previous episode. So they're all familiar with how Claros works.
Perfect. So essentially somebody is able to dispute however long they're willing to pay Claros for disputes, and try to get their claim. So this does two things. Like, first of all, even if we would act maliciously, there's always an instance that you can make your argument for and get the payout. Like, we can't stop that. The contracts are currently being written, and they will always be able to withdraw API3 from our staking pool in case you incurred legitimate damages.
Yeah, no, that's super cool. Yeah, I mean, this one here, so we were talking about this briefly with like other oracles as well. Like, I know you guys are managing it with the technical team, but this could almost be like an industry standard type piece as far as how is it managed, you know, what's the idea of managing it. Because like we have a similar, you know, we have similar problems. Like, how do you pick, whenever somebody asks for the Bitcoin price, they don't necessarily want to have to specify all 9 APIs that they want a median from, but or update them as time goes on. But then how do you update it? What's you know, usually like you just have to have like kind of a fuzzier range if you're changing APIs. So this is cool.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's the idea here. We have requests where people essentially, they don't care, but they also don't want to fully trust us, because we kind of manage that as a DAO, but they're insured for it. So they can essentially cover their bases on that front. So they're essentially trusting us with the curation, and if we do something wrong, they get a payout. And there are still people that don't want that. They want to specify their sources, and if that's the case, they essentially choose a beacon or a beacon set and define exactly which parameters are called on which sources. And then there's some very niche solutions where not like a data feed doesn't make sense. You only want it on a specific trigger or on request basis, and then you go down on the protocol level and go to the Airnode directly on request response or PubSub basis. Those are the 3 models.
No, so I guess for you guys right now it's your tech team, but in the future it's going to be, do you guys have governance in your system? Would it be like a governance contract that does this?
Yeah, so the idea is essentially there is a DAO. So the idea is essentially that the role to change the API names is at some point on ETH mainnet given to the DAO. And one of our co-founders wrote an article about how we intend to scale in the future, and that should be through chain native DAOs. So essentially, the core technical team, given that at some point there is a DAO emerging that wants to, for instance, manage the feeds on Avalanche, that if they make a valid argument to the main DAO why they should have control over it, that we essentially hand over control of the API naming on that chain to that specific DAO. Yeah,
no, that's interesting, because like we, you know, that was one of my next questions. So you guys would have this DAPI. This would be, it would have to be a kind of a contract on each of the networks.
Exactly.
Put it on. So like theoretically they could be different. What you're saying is, so you know, like if you could have, oh, cool.
And so like a beacon set, like a DAPI on AVAX could point to different sources than a DAPI. Like DAPI that is Bitcoin USD could point to different sources on ETH than it does on AVAX, depending on whatever factors.
Nice. And So like so whenever you talk about chain native DAOs, what is kind of the governance? What's included in that for API3? Like, do you guys still control token issuance, or is that fixed?
The token issuance, like there is a mint function, but the mint function is essentially limited to paying staking rewards for everybody that stakes API3. You stake API3, you can essentially vote on proposals and create proposals, and you have control over our treasuries. We have a primary treasury that requires 50%, a 50% threshold to essentially pass, that has control over all API3 that we have in our treasury, which should be, I don't know the exact number, something between 20 and 25 million. And then we have a secondary treasury that is control of our USDC that requires 15% to pass.
Cool. Well, I mean, do you guys have upgradable contracts? Like,
I actually don't know.
Could you like upgrade it and mint more if the
API3 token? No, we would need to create a new API3 token and cool. I guess convince people that that's the standard now.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that would be, it's good though. You know, if it goes down far enough, it's always an option.
Yeah. Luna 2.0.
Exactly. Okay, so you guys have treasury management with your DAOs, and then the governance would also be in charge eventually of doing the symbols. And
exactly. So you can just create a regular contract calls within the governance. So you could create a call to say use the API3, swap half of it for ETH, and then LP it on Uniswap V2.
Yep.
Like all in the possibility of a governance vote.
Well, are there like fees that are managed by it as well? So like, are there any like, you know, like I know down here you could like stake, you would have to stake for requests, or you could change like how much you have to stake for the beacons. Is that governance owned, or is that like set on a deployment?
That is set together with the respective API provider and like a team that decides like on the pricing. And compared to the protocol level, like you pay for the API and the beacon on the chain, and like in the native currency of the chain where it's deployed to. And from that payment, we essentially put a portions aside for gas costs, and the profit is shared between the provider and API3, or the providers. The providers bring the data, we bring the data coverage aspect, like the coverage of the product, and then we share the profits. API3 doesn't, like we don't distribute revenue to our token holders. What we do instead is we buy API3 on the open market with our profits and burn it.
So like, where do you guys get profits from? I guess whenever they're paying into the requests, some of it will go to the providers and some of it will go to you guys?
No, so on the, we'd have to talk about the three levels. So on the base level, people stake API3 and we pay out the provider, since it kind of creates this pressure of taking API3 off the circulating supply.
Your stake slowly goes down over time, I guess?
Yeah, like the initial idea of the base level is that you stake it, and initially you could unstake it and nothing happens, but we will turn that gradually into a burn, which means that at some point you're going to stake, let's say 100 API3, and within a month that 100 will be burned, and if you want access on the base layer, you will need to buy new 100 API3 and stake it, and that again gets burned, yada yada. Okay,
so it's more like, it's not necessarily like a traditional staking where you can lose it if you misbehave. It's like a subscription fee that like slowly goes over time. Yeah.
Okay. I'd compare it to something like a prepaid card, like a phone card. Yeah.
No, it works. And then you guys, you don't burn them, you use it to buy back, or you do burn?
Those are burned directly.
Okay.
Yeah. And on the DAPI or beacon level, we get paid in native tokens, like I mentioned. So let's say we get 100 BNB for a month, and then we check what the gas costs were on that specific beacon for the month, subtract the costs from essentially the revenue that gives us profit, the profit is shared between API3 and the provider or providers. And API, what the provider does with their part, I don't know, probably like whatever they do. API3 uses their profits to buy back API3 from the market and burn it.
Cool. And then, nice. All right. Lots of ways to make money there. Okay, so and then I guess is the governance theoretically on each chain is in charge of setting this.
Yeah, they essentially, once that is handed over, they could be charging whatever they want. Essentially, at that point, they manage the pricing, operation, whatever of that specific chain. I think if I had to draw a comparison, I'm not sure if you know of Pocket Network. Probably heard of them before.
We love the Pocket.
Yeah,
yeah.
They do something similar currently. Like initially they managed all of the deployments of all chains, and then essentially you could participate and relay on a specific chain, but they're now building something called shards, where they're handing over the management of a specific network to a group of people, and they are fully in charge of that. That's how that group of people makes their money, and the main DAO, like the Pocket DAO, incentivizes them with some tokens as well. So like it's in their best interest to generate money. They're responsible for how they do it, and they can get incentivized for it. And that's, I think, in some way where API3 is also going to go into in the future.
Yeah, cool. Over onto the API providers, and as far as like who is allowed to become an API provider? Can anyone just spin up an Airnode and could I spin up an Airnode with my API, start pushing to a beacon contract, and people can subscribe to it? Or is that, or even just to the request people can use it to pull in my prices?
So essentially what we're currently building is two different marketplaces. One is called Chain API, and there anybody can deploy an Airnode, and it's going to be essentially a marketplace, an API marketplace, where you automatically get listed with your product once you have the configuration done, and then you can get access through the means we just discussed. As for beacons and the DAPIs, those are currently products we do with a select few API providers, since those are products that we as API3 are also covering for misreports, whatever. So it's in our best interest to only choose things that we think are worth the risk. But of course, the contracts are all public, so anybody, and the client as well, so anybody could just take an Airnode, connect their API to it, deploy the contracts to actually create beacons or the APIs, and just do it without us involved. I think there is actually some protocols on AVAX that essentially did that. They're running their own Airnode because they have a very specific API, and they're using that themselves to feed into their contracts.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's sort of like the people doing, the chain link thing, where they'll run a chain link node and push their own.
Exactly.
And,
exactly.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. And can I ask, just who are your API providers, and what's been I don't know if you're even on the biz dev side, but what's been the response? Whenever you go to some of these people, are they like, hell no, or you have to pay us $1 million a year, or what's been the response there?
So if you're talking on the Airnode level, just essentially making their entire API available, most of them see this. I wouldn't even say they necessarily, when they look at this, they see this as, oh my God, blockchain, or oh my God, crypto. What they see this as is, we explain it to them, this is just another way for them to monetize data. They use this client that makes their API reachable over the blockchain, and they don't really care how exactly that would work. They just make their API available through another means. And for them, this is just another marketplace similar to, I'm not sure if you're familiar with something called Rapid API. It's like a big data marketplace, and essentially we want Chain API to become something like that for Web3. You go there, you have all sorts of providers listed, all sorts of data, and then you access that by staking API3, and you get access to all sorts of APIs that you need for your smart contracts. And they get the idea of it. They know it's demand-based, it's a marketplace, and people have the ease of like finding something and using it, and they don't really expect like some profit right off the bat. There's also like no cost that they would have to cover in the like to get started. It's very, it's an open source node. They can deploy it themselves. There's no involvement from us required, and they can just get started without anything. On the beacon side, I think it's a little bit more complex, since there's also operational costs involved, and there we have like more known providers. Something like Amber Data is something I can say currently, because we have deployed testnet beacons with them for ETH Denver and so on. But there are others, mainly also from providers that you can find on our website. We have something called the API3 Alliance, and those are, I think, currently 180 API providers, and mainly from that pool, we're going to be picking the operators for beacons and the APIs, essentially.
Any governments on board yet?
No.
That's, I've always wondered, like, once, you know, people have always asked us for like an inflation number and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like, once you actually can get like the US government running a node and throwing data on chain, it'll be like a really good oracle. Like, if you're going to use a trusted source, like, you might as well use them. So
yeah, I mean, it kind of depends. You could still use that one source and combine it with others to get your median one. I think it's just another data point where, and you should know where it comes from. It doesn't necessarily mean you should blindly trust it.
oh, come on.
But yeah, no governments yet, I guess.
Cool. Okay, but and one of the things I wanted to touch here, so I know this was actually one of the cooler pieces, which I like about you guys, is whenever, you know, so like, let's say we go over here and I don't know, what's a new chain that like you guys probably wouldn't go on, or something, like somebody launches some new L1 EVM chain, you know, like I don't know, Pulse chain or a
Pulse chain. Let's go.
Yeah, like, and it's over here. One of the cool things about this is, like, if you're doing the request model, correct me if I'm wrong, but like they could still use all the prices, right? Like, they wouldn't, like, if they're listening to an Airnode, could they still sort of just bring over the prices?
Yeah. So what Airnode is it's just the Oracle node, and it can be configured with RPCs, and which RPCs you define is necessarily up to the provider. So essentially, if somebody comes from an arbitrary chain and says, we want access to your data, but we see you don't serve that chain yet, the first requirement would be that somebody deploys the Airnode contracts, request response, whatever, so that essentially the base contract is there that the Airnode would listen to, and then that Airnode of the provider would need to be redeployed with another or multiple RPC providers of that new chain. So it could be Infura, the public one. Oh, sorry, I didn't catch that.
I mean, would you need to, like, if I was over here, if it's an EVM chain as well, and I said, like,
yeah,
I want the Bitcoin price, but I made the request over here on Polygon, for instance, and was just listening. Could I just take it and put it there?
In the future, we'll allow you to make a request on one chain and answer you onto another, but not quite yet.
No, well, you mean the Airnode provider actually has to be the one pushing it to the chain?
They're essentially listening to the chain, and the user is then funding the push on that chain. It's always the user that pays for it, never the provider.
It's not like the user can grab the signed message and put it on chain themselves?
In the future, maybe.
In the future. Okay.
But currently, how it works is that essentially each chain has the Airnode contract deployed. The Airnode, if the RPC is if the Airnode is configured to check that specific chain, it checks that specific chain. It has a request been made to me, and then it answers on that specific chain.
Okay, cool. Yeah, see, I was actually under the impression, maybe that was like a while ago, that you guys were just getting maybe the more signed prices and the user can push the signed prices themselves. Or is that not ever been the case?
It's something that I can't go into, but let's just put it like this. Airnode has an HTTP gateway that you can use to essentially get signed data from the source directly, and then you could essentially do things.
Cool. Understood. So, and now I guess, where else? What am I forgetting in this was a whole giant realm of API3.
Yeah.
Where else should we go, or what else should we kind of touch on if you're using API3?
I think one thing I could be going into is I think we talked about the minting function. So what staking API3 does is you get rewards because you take on a risk of a potential slashing event.
So this is not staking for a request or for the beacon. You're
no, just the token holder to take part in governance.
Here.
Exactly. And that staking pool is essentially covering potential.
So this is where it goes into the insurance. For the
let's call it coverage. There are some regulatory issues of calling that stuff insurance, so let's stick with coverage. Yeah. But yeah, essentially that pool covers the APIs and beacons for data correctness under the given parameters.
Yep, and then they get minted new tokens from the governance.
Exactly, they take on the risk, they get minted new tokens, and they are potentially getting slashed if somebody makes a valid claim of damages.
Yep, and then what rate do they get paid at? Is that a variable?
Yes, so essentially we have a staking target that is adjustable by the DAO. More coverage demand means we're gonna up that target. And if the target is not met, APR increases every week. If the target is met, APR decreases by each week. So it's fluctuating depending on the demand or depending on the parameters that the DAO sets.
Cool. All right. Yeah, I mean, how is staking live yet?
Yeah, since last year. So essentially, mostly because of governance reasons, there is going to be a governance vote on activating the functionality of slashing once we're essentially covering our data products.
Cool. Staking.
Yeah, I think the only other thing that's worth saying is that it's currently mostly EVM chains, but we're working on other things at the moment.
Yeah, theoretically, you could go to any chain with the structure. You just launch it, and then as long as you're open to the chain native DAOs. But then I guess the chain native DAOs that would come in. So like, what would you guys do? So what would be the staking over on Avalanche?
That is up to the DAO to decide how they want to make a proposal to the main DAO to do that. I think the beauty of it is that nobody has it like completely figured out, and people will be able to make a compelling argument of why they should manage that specific operation on that specific chain. For all I know, it could be I'm going to create this token and I'm going to airdrop 50% of it to all API3 holders. And everybody is financially incentivized to do that, or they come up with another economic model that makes sense to the main DAO. Like at the end of the day, the main DAO is going to have essentially control over that, and they have the ability to give the whitelisting role to anybody who makes a compelling argument to it.
Well, yeah. Well, so I mean, like, there's like a few options you can obviously do on multiple chains. You know, like we've gone down similar paths. So like you can either, obviously you can bridge API3 over and have people stake that. That's perfectly valid, probably for a lot of chains and rollups. You could use the native token. Using the native token of the chain could work, but then you have no minting, obviously, or at least, hopefully you don't. And then another option would be you would just
create a new one.
Create a new token, right? Those are like the three options that you have.
Yeah, I mean, all of it comes with its, I think pluses and damn, my English today, like with its benefits and also like disadvantages. I guess like the disadvantage of bridging API3 over will be that governance will be distributed across all chains, and it might put the main DAO essentially under like in danger, because voting power is also not on the total token supply, it's under the staked token supply. So essentially, if we only have 10% of the supply staked, you only need 5% to 50% attack the DAO. So once you spread the token across all chains, that might be tricky. But creating a new token will also mean, like, how do we manage value accrual to the API3 token? Like, all things that are worth discussing.
Yeah, no, and then same with, you know, if you're on, even just being on a whole bunch of chains is just difficult from a managerial perspective. Like, you know, there's tons of chains out there, like how do you even manage them? And then, you know, the other one that we've run into too, like, which you talked about it initially, like you have the main token and the main governance on main chain ETH, and like none of the new users or demand is coming from main chain ETH. So it's like there's this giant disconnect. Yeah, and I don't know if there's any solution there. It's
we're getting those questions as well. Like, I think it's now less than before, because interest in crypto plummeted by 90%. But back in the day where crypto was still interesting, I think there hasn't been a day that has gone by where we haven't got asked, why aren't we on BSC, or why aren't we on AVAX? And I think the typical answer is, when it comes to governance and managing a treasury, at this point, I don't want to have the funds anywhere else than ETH mainnet. But if in the future something comes up as the more superior, battle-tested smart contract platform, that is essentially up for debate. But that is my personal opinion. I don't think there's currently anything out there that is as battle-tested as ETH in securing DAO treasuries and governance.
Yeah, no, I mean, we have some tokens, luckily not much, but it's locked over on Harmony because the Harmony bridge went down and it's still not up. So
and that's also the issue. Bridges, goddamn bridges. Like, I don't even want to deal with that. It's just such a pain.
Yeah, for sure. But okay, this was really good. Anything else I can I'll sort of stop sharing. We can hopefully people got a good view of the API3 ecosystem, but this was really great. I think, yeah, overall, it's a super cool model. You know, it's a lot different than, you know, we talked to Witnet, Claro, Stellar. Like there's so many different ways that you can do an Oracle, and you guys are obviously up to a lot. So what, I guess, to finish up, where can people find out more about API3 and events?
You could hit us up next week in Paris at ECC. Pretty sure there's going to be a lot of people there. And otherwise, always jump onto our Discord and read more on our website. We have been up to a lot in the recent months, and I hope the next couple of weeks and months are going to be very exciting. So there's going to be things that we have been working on being made available and stuff like that.
Super cool. Ugur from API3, everyone. Thank you so much. Look forward to talking soon.
Perfect. Thanks for your time.